record. All right, everyone, welcome to another Star Talk. And we are joined with Mary Lou Wells today, and we're going to get started. I'm going to share my screen. Mary Lou has asked me to share some things with you. I'm going to share this picture. This is the vernal equinox. Mary Lou, I'm showing them a picture. Right. The sun on the ecliptic right overhead in Pisces.
Okay. Now, does it also show the celestial equator?
It does, yes. That is
good.
Red line.
Okay. All right. Later on in the talk, I'll go over what that all means. But they can see it.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So who's here? Who have we got? Debbie, Mary Lou, Jerry, Rima, and you, Melanie, and me?
Yes.
So far? Okay. Let me know if the Pipels tune in or anybody else a little bit late, okay?
I can do that.
All right. Well, folks, we're going to, everybody's mic should be open at this point, Melanie, so they can talk back to me for a few minutes.
Okay.
All right. Everybody had an assignment, and there are a few people absent, and I don't have a list of who had what, so I'm just going to ask the question, and whoever had the assignment, or if you did it extra and the other person's not here, just speak up. I asked, or maybe I asked everybody to do this, to compare red Mars with red Aldebaran, and I wanted to know why each of them was red and what made it so. So who has an answer, guys?
Well, I know that Mars is red because it has iron in the rocks.
Who's that? Is that you, Debbie?
That's me.
Okay. Yeah, the dust and the rocks on the surface of Mars have a lot of iron oxide, Fe2O3, and that is reddish in color. Now, how do we see that red color? Did anybody do that part of the answer? Okay. It's because the sunlight reflects off of the surface of Mars. Mars does not give any light off of its own. And so we see a reflection of that reddish Earth on the surface of Mars. Now, who did Aldebaran? Why is it red?
Okay, because it's a cool star.
It's a star, right? And it's giving off what? Its own light?
Yes, and it's cool in temperature compared to a blue-white star.
All righty, so it's a red giant star, which is you wouldn't want to touch it if you were up there. It's really, really hot, but it's compared to other stars, it's on the cool end of the heat spectrum. All righty, I think I asked about Easter. When is the earliest possible date for we in the West, the Christian church in the West, to have Easter? And then when was the latest possible date? Anybody get that?
Well, I had that first one. The earliest possible date that I found was March 23rd.
Well, okay, I figured it out just by knowing the facts, and I figured out March 21st was the first possible date.
March what?
March 21st.
Oh, okay. Well, I tried it that way, and then I looked in my almanac, and there was 100 years of Easters, and I went down through and picked out the earliest date.
But I think the earliest goes way back to the 1500s. You didn't go back far enough. Okay. Well, when we talk about Easter, we'll go through how I figured it out as the 21st. What was the latest date? Who had that?
Melanie had, no. The Babbitts, John and Sue Babbitt,
yeah.
Had the last possible date.
But I looked it up, and I got April 25th is the latest.
That's what I figured also. April 25th is the latest it could be for us. And that's almost a 5-week gap between early and late. Easter is what you'd call a movable feast. All righty. Very quickly, did anybody go back far enough? When was the last time it was really, really, really early?
I did. It was 1818 was the last time. It was on March 22nd.
Okay, 1818. All righty. Anybody? The latest. When was that? The last
Nine,
time it was.
1943 was the last
Oh,
time it was on April 25th.
okay.
And
I don't know.
the next time will
Yes.
be on 2038.
Okay.
So
I don't know.
maybe.
I don't know why we. People always like the biggest and the littlest, and it's kind of fun to think about it that way. Alrighty, this year, spring came on the 20th of March. The full moon came on the 28th, a little over a week later, and Easter therefore was on April 4th, coming up. Because in the Christian world, and I don't know when they decided this. That's another date we could probably look up. In the West, they decided the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox. So this uses both where the moon is in our sky in relationship to where the spring equinox is in the sky, and then we figure it's a Sunday. So things can get pretty complicated. All righty. Does anybody have any questions about those things before we mute you all and move on to the topic of the day?
Wait, Mary Lou, you didn't do my question.
Oh, what was it, Debbie? Sorry.
Mine was what month in the Muslim calendar?
Oh, right.
Yeah. Does Ramadan fall in? The 9th one, I think.
Okay, we're going to double research that because in my notes I had the 3rd month of their year.
Oh,
So we'll double check on that, okay, Debbie?
okay.
All right. Any others that I forgot that I asked?
Oh.
Okay.
Yes.
What?
You said, how is Passover related to the equinox and the moon?
Oh, yes.
And that was
Bob's question.
Bob's question, but I would like to know the answer.
All right. What we're going to do is just talk briefly about calendars, and then we'll get to our, excuse me a minute, our holidays. And I had a very long, somewhat contentious, Sandy, are you there? That was my friend Sandy, who listens in from time to time. And she's Jewish, and we disagreed about some things, but we came to a consensus. And when we get to the Passover part, I'll tell you how we decided it. Okay, Mary Lou? Okay. So everybody has to be quiet for a few minutes, and I'll do my thing. I want to just you have that, Melanie, the map is still up in front of them?
Yes.
Yeah, Melanie, why don't you stay online? Remember I said the ecliptic is like a highway through the stars, that the sun travels down the middle of the ecliptic? I want to revise something that I said about the zodiac, the moon, and the planets that also travel on that highway. They do it within 10 degrees north and south of the line. I had said 15. I think that was wrong. I double checked. It's 10 degrees north and south of the ecliptic that all the signs of the zodiac, our planets and the moon, move through that same part of the sky. So, okay, that was a review. Now, I seem to have a frog in my throat. We really aren't going to go into depth about time and how the stars, etc., keep track of the time for us at another time, because that can take easily more than 20 minutes to go over. But I'm just going to very, very briefly talk about one, since our Earth rotates from day to night, that gives us night and day, 12 hours and 12 hours, roughly 24 hours altogether. The length of the day will vary with the seasons. Daytime is longer in the summer for us, right, than in the winter. And it depends on the latitude. Once again, we're at about, I'm going to say 45 degrees. We're not quite. I think it's 41 and something, halfway up from the equator to the pole. So this will affect the length of our days and nights. throughout the year. Um, we'll go into greater detail at some other time. Then we have the lunar calendar, full moon to full moon, and it's 29.4 days. And before agriculture, when we were hunter gatherers, the moon basically was a goddess and pretty high up in the hierarchy of gods and goddesses. And it gave us the month. And then, of course, we have the stars, of which our sun is. Our sun is a star. We tend to think of it as the sun, but really it's the same as another star. And as we already have learned, some stars, like Sirius in Egypt, when it rose at dawn in July, that was the beginning of their year, their new year. For the Maori, Bob found out that the Pleiades, an open cluster of stars, for them in December, the beginning of their summer, that was the beginning of their new year. For us, our new year in January, I believe, goes back to the Romans, and it was more about politics than what was happening in the sky. Maybe we'll go there someday too and find out what was going on. Once we had a solar calendar, and that was mainly connected to when we became farmers, 4 important dates popped up throughout the year: the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes. And these came to mark our various religious ceremonies, and they still do for many religions today. Okay, now the vernal equinox, which happened when? Was it on the 20th? Was that last Saturday or the Saturday before? Whenever that was, the 20th. What did that mean up in the sky or here on Earth? I always thought of it as, let me think. If you lived on the equator, anywhere around the world on the equator, on that particular day, the beginning of spring, the vernal equinox, at noon, and noon by definition is the sun is halfway across the sky from sunrise to sunset, and it's overhead. It's at the zenith, not necessarily over your head, depending on where you are on Earth, but at the high point of its arc. Noon, zenith. Well, on the vernal equinox, it is over your head, straight up 90 degrees, and it's moving north towards summer in the northern hemisphere, leaving behind the southern hemisphere, which is turning into winter. So that's how I always thought of the vernal equinox. And it was only 2-3 years ago that I realized astronomers had a very different definition. And now if you look at the screen that Melanie put up, remember the sun travels along the ecliptic with a series of stars in the background, and the celestial equator is another line in the sky that hovers over our equator on the Earth. It's like a sphere around the ball. And those 2 lines are not parallel, which means sometimes they cross each other. As a matter of fact, twice a year at the 2 equinoxes. For us, it was the spring equinox, and your sun, Melanie, is the sun sitting at a dot where the 2 lines cross?
Yep.
Yes, good. The geographer was paying attention to astronomy class. He got it right. So for us, the vernal equinox is when that's where the sun is in the sky with a certain bunch of constellations behind it. Those of you that are into astrology know all about this. I don't. But I do know that, and once again, we'll talk about why this happens at another time. But for now, 6,000 years ago, when we were first becoming farmers and knowing when to plant the seed in the spring was very important, the sun was in Taurus the bull in those days. And we understand that Taurus the bull, part of the zodiac, is a very ancient constellation. Many cultures around the world, it was very important in their hierarchy. and we can understand why it symbolizes fertility, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now, if the chart that Melanie has, I think the zodiac is in the background, the sun has shifted to the left towards the east and is now in Pisces, the fish, at the vernal equinox. So I don't know what that says to astrology, but anyway. Okay, to get on to the subject of the day, we already went over Easter, and I think many of you knew that anyway. So, Passover. Now, this is complicated. Once again, this is a religious lunar calendar. I mean, I think most Jews in America go by the Gregorian calendar. The rest of us, all use. But for religious purposes, they are still utilizing the ancient lunar calendar that is slightly modified, and that's why it's so complicated as to when Passover is. If anybody's ever thought about this or tried to match up 29.4 days, the lunar month, with an equal number of months in a 365 and 1/4 day year, solar year, it's not easy. It doesn't fit. It's like 8th grade math when all of a sudden you had to use fractions. And you just can't get it to jive. So basically, here's what happens. Let me see if I can read my notes. Passover begins at sundown, the day before the full moon, which comes after the vernal equinox. So this year, it was Friday evening it started. Saturday was the full moon. The week before was the vernal equinox. And this would fall on the 14th day of the 7th month. Their year starts in September usually. So by the time March rolls around, it's the 7th month. However, they adjust their calendar to try and keep it in sync with the sun. So every 3 or 4 or 5 years or so, they have to stick in an extra month. So they double up, and they have 2 7th months. This is what Sandy and I got into a big argument about, because once in a blue moon, Passover comes in the middle or late April. So it's not the first after the first full moon. So that's a little complicated. Then Ramadan, and we're going to double check this. I thought it always came in the 3rd month. To some extent, it wouldn't matter what month it comes in because the Muslims do not adjust their lunar calendar. They just let the moon put on cycle after cycle after cycle, year after year after year, such that I should have asked somebody when Ramadan was this year. Let's just assume it's in August. We're assuming it's in August. It begins during their 3rd month of the year, and it goes from new moon to new moon. Not full moon to full moon, new moon to new moon. And here we have to clarify. Astronomically, scientifically, the new moon is the moon we can't see. It's the once in the cycle when it's between us and the sun, and so it's invisible to us. And the next day, right after sundown in the glare of the setting sun in the west, will be a very, very thin sliver of the new crescent moon. Most of us, in common terms, call that the new moon. And that's what the Muslims call. When they can spot that crescent, really it's day 2 of the moon's cycle, that's when their month of Ramadan begins, and it goes from new moon to new moon. However, since they don't adjust their calendar, next year their calendar has lost 11 days. So instead of being at, let's say, the 11th of August, the first day will be the 1st of August. And the next year it'll be in July, and it keeps going. And it takes 33 years to go full cycle to come back to where Ramadan began 33 years ago. So that's why, if any of you have ever paid attention, I used to have some students that were Muslims, and some of them would fast, and it was much easier for them to do it In the winter, when the days were shorter because you fast from sunrise to sunset, than in the summer when the days were much longer and hotter. You couldn't drink either. So I think that's kind of interesting. And then to throw in, let's see, I had to throw in one more here. The Chinese New Year is basically the second new moon after the winter solstice. So that puts it sometime in late January, more often in February. And the reason for this is the beginning of their new year is once again connected to spring. Now, Japan has 4 major islands. The northernmost, Hokkaido, however you say that, never was really populated by the Japanese in olden times. The Anhui lived up there, an indigenous people. The Japanese really were from the 3 big southern islands, and especially the 2 most southern ones were semi-tropical. So farming, rice planting began in February in those places. So that second new moon after the winter solstice marked the beginning of their planting season. So I thought that was all really, really interesting in that originally we didn't have clocks and we looked up and we studied the stars and the moon and our sun and they decided what time of the year it was. So anyway, okay, let's put everybody back online. Melanie, can we hook everybody back up?
Yep.
All righty. I have assignments ready. Do we still just have the original people, or did anybody sign in late?
Nope, just the originals.
Okay. Let's see. Debbie, I'm going to start with you because you were interested. We talked about Regulus in the constellation Leo, remember? Debbie there? Okay. Mary Lou, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, who's that?
That's Debbie.
Okay, Debbie, here's your assignment. There's a new vocabulary word. Asterism. Asterism.
Okay.
Right. So I want you to look up that definition, and then I'll give you one example. Remember when we talked about Regulus and Leo, the lion, how we could find it in the sky by the backwards question mark or the sickle? Okay, that sickle is an asterism. I want you to, there's a very famous other asterism in our sky, and what is it? So definition of asterism, and what's another famous asterism in the sky?
Okay.
Okay. Noreen? All right. Mary Lou, are you there? And Jerry?
Yes.
Okay. Each one can do one of these, all right? Mary Lou, what is a real double star? And give an example. And Jerry has to tell us what is an apparent double star and give an example.
No, yours is apparent. What is
Right.
an apparent double star?
Yeah, different than a real double star. Okay, can Rima here, or Melanie, you can give her assignment?
Yep.
All right, Rima has to tell us how to find M44 and what is its nickname. M44 is another open cluster that you can see with your naked eye if you know where to look. So Rima's going to tell us how to find it, and then what is its nickname. Oh, Melanie, do you want me to just assign Bob's hard one, or do you want to get stuck with it?
You can stick it to me.
All right.
I'll give it a try.
Alrighty. In Gemini, the twins, one of the twins is a star called Castor, Caster, and that's a very special unusual kind of double star. So you research Castor and tell me how many stars make up what we see as one star called Castor, and how do they go around each other? Mm. And then once you find that, you can put it up on screen for everybody to see for next time. How's that sound?
Okay.
Okay. Um, okay, Melanie has put up the April star chart for folks to print off, or if you don't have a printer, she'll have a few at the library. You can pick up. Our next meeting is on the 13th of April. And do we have any time for questions? I think maybe a few
Sure.
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions, anybody?
I don't have a question, Mary Lou, but I'll go back and see what I can find out about Ramadan and the Muslim calendar.
Okay, you could very well be right. I had it written down as a third month from back when I taught art. I don't remember where I picked. Maybe I had asked one of my Muslim students, and they didn't always. I sometimes knew more about their religion than they did. It was kind of embarrassing. I mean, for them. But
Well,
anyway,
I could very
so
well be wrong, but I'll go back and look it up again.
okay.
Thanks.
And why do you do that? Why don't you find out? Somehow I'm feeling it's going on now, or I heard about it in the news in the last month.
It's going on now.
Okay. So when did it be? Oh, so it began with the new moon. Yeah. I personally love our relationship with the environment, including the stars, and we will talk about clocks and sundials and counterclockwise and where we come up with that word. And when we switch to digital time, I will never own a digital clock of choice because it totally dissociates yourself from the real world. And the Muslims, of course, they originated in basically a semi-arid desert area, and usually the sky was clear, so you could see the new moon when it showed up for the month of Ramadan. Nowadays, Muslims live all over the world, and so the word was out that they were thinking of forgetting having to visually see it and just announce it, on the radio or wherever, on your app, your Ramadan app, is there such a thing? And I just thought, sorry on that. Don't throw out tradition just because it becomes more difficult. So anyway, that's how I feel about, do you really need a watch? Just look up and look at where the sun is in the sky. You should be able to do it within 15 minutes.
You can't do that from here.
I know Mary Lou and Jerry and Steve and Debbie, I know they live in a hole and they can't see the sky. And sorry, guys, you weren't thinking when you bought your house. Sometime in May, we're going to do up here on the hill a view of the southern sky. And then I'm offering Sandy's place. That'll teach her not to be online. She has a great porch and she and Jeff, a huge patio in front of their cabin 7 miles out of town. It's really a house. With you can see the whole North sky. So we'll do the circumpolar stars and Polaris and all of that sometime, I don't know, June or July. So we'll do some outdoor stuff. Okay, any other questions or comments? Oh, you know what? We got to think of a hard thing. I'm going to call up Bob because he missed. And what can we stick him with? Nobody has an idea. Melanie, do I have like 2 more minutes that I can add something or not?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. When I was teaching art, I did a whole 2-week unit. I called it, what did I call it? The Monuments to the Ancient Gods and Goddesses. And basically, it was like an astronomy connected to archaeology and architecture, such as Stonehenge. We all know about Stonehenge. Well, somewhere down in Peru, which is south of the equator, which means everything's backwards for them, It's not backwards for us. We have it right. They're backwards. But anyway, they had a wonderful architectural feature in a plaza in one of their towns that told them when they could plant the potatoes at various elevations. You know, Peru starts at sea level, but the plain by the sea is very narrow, and then you practically go straight up into the Andes. And then there's a intermountain plateau area, probably up at 7, 8, 9,000 feet. And then the mountains go up to what, 14,000, some of them? So anyway, potatoes, which we all eat as a basic part of our diet, originally evolved in the Andes Mountains. But as you well know, anybody that gardens, Hornell or Wellsville, being about 800 feet lower, no, 1,000 feet lower than Alfred. Usually spring comes about a week or two earlier, and the fall comes a week or two later than here, higher in the hills. So here's what the people in this city in Peru did 1,000, 1 or 2,000, 3,000 years ago. In the middle of the town was a paved courtyard, and in the middle of the courtyard was a pillar that stood, I don't know, 15, 20 feet high. And of course, pillars, like sundials, cast shadows. And being in the southern hemisphere, the shadow would be cast towards the south, opposite what it does up here. Alrighty, and some of you may know this, some may never have observed this. In the summer, shadows are quite short. In the winter, they're quite long. And it all has to do with where the sun is in the sky. So around this pillar on the stone courtyard flat land, they had concentric circles getting further and further away from the pillar in the middle. And then in the early days, like now, March, I don't want to go out there and plant my potatoes yet. It's too early. So the shadow, the tip of the pole, pillar, would shine on one of the further out concentric circles. But as the season shifted towards summer, when the shadows got shorter, the tip of that pole's shadow would move towards the base of the pole. And so they had a chart. If it's at this circle, further away, you can plant here in the valley. But if it's at this circle, closer to the pole, you have to wait to plant higher up the slopes. And I don't know why, I think things like this are so fascinating, that the human brain, by observing and keeping records and thinking about it, can say, aha, here's a way we can predict when to plant our potatoes at different elevations. And I'm sorry, I think the modern brain where a kid just presses a button and it tells them when is not the brain of a really smart human being that figures things out for themselves. I don't know. What do you all think? Oops.
Yeah, the
Hello?
problem is, Mary Lou, when they lose the device that they're pressing the button on, then they have no clue.
That's right. I actually had a young guy once delivering pizza here in the wintertime, and he ran out of gas. He was delivering it from down in Alfred, 4 miles away. And he walked up the road a half mile to borrow my phone to call the pizza place to have somebody come get him and the pizza he was delivering. And he looks at my wall phone. And he stands there and he looks at it. And then he turns to me and says, how does this work? Which I realize, when you're used to a touch-tone phone, but honest, is it that hard to look at a dial phone and not figure it out? Oh, well. So shall we wrap up, guys?
Sure.
Okay.
I can go eat lunch.
You're going to go eat lunch?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Thanks, Mary Lou.
You're welcome. Bye.
Melanie, is
Bye-bye.
the picture for April, the night sky, on your website at Moxie Books that I can go print off now?
Yes, it where the Zoom link is for today's session, the link to the sky chart is in there.
Okay, got it. Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, Melanie. And thank you once again for doing all this.
You're welcome.
Have fun with your, well, I'm sure you can find it somewhere relatively easy online, but it's quite an amazing combination of stars up there and what they're
Well,
doing.
I'm excited to find out.
And you know what? And if for some reason you can't find a diagram of it, although I'm sure you will, you could draw one of your own and put it up.
Well, nobody needs to see that.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll give you a hint. A simple double star would simply be two stars, and they don't have to be the same size or mass or color. And what they do is they rotate around each other from some point in the middle that you take their mass. It's like two kids on a seesaw. You know, the little kid has to sit way out to balance the heavy kid sitting closer in. So it's almost the opposite for mass and gravity. So wherever the center of gravity is, so it would be closer to the denser, more massive star, they rotate around that point.
Okay.
So that's just a simple two of them. But Castor is much more complex. So have fun with that. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.